Wache, Ani, Roju, Sego. I am Kiwe Tinwe in the Ne. That name translates into North Windman. I'm from the people of the Mushkegowuk, people of the river, Chapleau Cree First Nation Bear Clan. I am a beautiful person. I'm also sitting here with another beautiful person today, and it's my friend, it's my brother Dave Skene. And Dave, I'd like to offer you this tobacco just for gifting us with your time today. And what we're going to do is we're just going to hang out.
Yeah.
Like we always do.
That's what I like doing. I do that best. My wife says that's my, it's actually my job.
Hang out. Well, I got my tea, you got your
My
coffee.
coffee.
So let's have a little cheers and open this up. So, the past few months we've been doing interviews with leaders and individuals in our community that walk with us and work with Crow Shield Lodge. There's been opportunities where individuals want to have time like us, time with us like this, but if they don't walk with us or work with us, why is the point of sharing a space and talking about a relationship? Because that relationship is not there or it's not built yet. I believe that this is the time to step outside of our boxes, to do a bit of free thinking and think about what partnerships can do, to bring organizations together, how we can start doing things that have never been done before, and maybe how we can just challenge the system a bit in a very, very gentle way. But I know that at Crow Shield Lodge, we look at this time, Dave, as a time of opportunity. And it's amazing what can happen with this time. I just want to start and go back a bit. Where did we meet? And that was a few years ago that we met with a mutual friend of ours who's no longer in this country, I guess.
Yeah.
But he connected us together, and it was pretty amazing, because I think I remember the first time that we worked together. It was at a camp that you were doing something outside of Cambridge, and Camp Shalom.
Shalom.
Camp Shalom. And I showed up there, and it was just amazing to see what you had undergoing and what you had going on with all these youth. And it was like, I think I was invited for dinner, and then we went into this mess hall, and there was just like, people were cooking, people were serving, people were cleaning up, and it was just like everybody knew their role, and it was just really awesome. And then afterwards, we came out by the fire, and we spent some time together. And maybe you could just recap about what you were doing at that time in your life, because you had a different role than you have now.
Yeah, at that time, I'm glad you thought everything was organized, because I don't know. I don't know how organized it actually was, but I'm glad it looked organized. For almost over 25 years, I worked, a group of students and myself founded an organization called Global Youth Network.
Okay.
And then I worked with them worked with the organization for, I think, maybe 27 years. But the focus of that organization was to take university students internationally on a trip where they learned about justice issues from the grassroots organizations within countries that were working towards justice.
Okay.
So it was really a learning trip. There wasn't a volunteer trip, although we did do work, and we worked with the community. If the community was gardening or harvesting or planting, we would do that kind of work, but the focus was really to learn, and then to be able to take that experience, for the students to be able to take that experience back home, and have an understanding that how grassroots organizations, the power of grassroots organizations to create change, and hopefully for the students to get involved, or even to create something like they experienced when they traveled out. And that was what you came to was our training event. So we train all through the year, but then we have one intensive weekend where we go through training. And then right after that training, they fly out to their different countries. And at one time, we had maybe like 35 different groups from universities across Canada that traveled out, maybe about 200, 250 students. And they would travel out to, I think, like about 20 countries.
Okay.
To work, and we made a commitment to those countries. We worked with their grassroots organizations, and we would return every year and work with them. And so yeah, it was a great job.
Okay.
But then it became attractive to a lot of people who weren't really interested in the learning part, but just wanted to kind of have a little time with the community, but much more time for the beach and more kind of like tourism. And so eventually we just saw that we weren't, it wasn't really meeting the need that we really wanted to.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. So when you did that initiative for that many years, how did it impact the students or the youth? What was a measurable thing that you could say that time and that opportunity really impacted those youth that you were walking and talking with?
There was a number of things that happened from, like, there was one of the youth that worked with us started an organization in Toronto called Jayu, which was a grassroots organization that used art to communicate about justice. Mm-hmm. Which is still going. He's not involved in it anymore, but that organization is still going. We had people that went on to be involved in other grassroots organizations in leadership across Canada in different locations. Some of those people are still very much involved in grassroots organizations. So we saw, like, it wasn't necessarily something that happened like connected to Global Youth Network, but there was a lot of stuff that happened across Canada with these students. And yeah, it was a great time. It was really fulfilling because we knew we were supporting communities internationally, and we knew we were supporting our own communities here in Canada. So it was a good circle of learning and doing.
Okay, so is the Global Youth Network still up and operating today, or is it just taking a rest? Or
well, it operates in a much smaller capacity.
Okay.
So we haven't hosted teams. I'm still on the board. I don't work with the organization, but we haven't hosted a team since the pandemic. We actually had a team go out right at the time of the March of the pandemic, and wow. We had to kind of rescue them out of Kenya, and then the leader of that group got stuck in Kenya for 3 or 4 months during the pandemic. So that was the last team, and that was that wasn't because of the pandemic. I mean, obviously we couldn't do much, but we are just changing gears. And so the thing we do right now is we're really focused on a one project that we have going in Kenya. And that came out of asking some questions with a group of Kenyans who are working in orphanages. And so their question was, why do we have orphanages? Because most children who are in orphanages have a parent or a family member that they could be with, but their parent or family member can't afford to keep them.
Okay. And
so it's not a matter of that. It's our classic understanding of orphan is that they don't have any parents. Right. Typically, orphanages are full of kids who have a parent at least. And so the question was, like, how do we not use orphanages? How do we solve the greater problem, which is to find a way for mothers and grandmothers or whoever to care for their kids? So we worked with an organization that became that got established. It's now called Living Positive, mm-hmm. and their whole thing is to work with mothers to because of HIV/AIDS within Kenya. Yeah. A lot of the mothers were sick. So they started working with the mothers in healthcare so that they could stay healthy to look after their kids. And then the second piece of that was for them to find some sort of micro industry that they could begin to have some money to keep their kids at home. And so we're still doing that, living positive, still have that connection, and still working to keep kids with their families and in their homes, and yeah.
It's almost like the kinship program that happens here, right? You know, within different societies, and where we want to really try our best to keep the children with the family, if it's uncles and aunts or grandparents or whatever.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Can we just back this up a little bit?
Yeah, for sure.
And can you maybe introduce yourself?
Yeah.
In regards to who you are, what you do now, because I know that you know, we're going to pivot now to what you do today.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. So maybe you could just give us a breakdown of who you are, where you're from, and and the gifts that you carry.
Yeah. So my name's Dave Skene. I like my name. It carries some significant understanding. So David means the beloved one, and Skene is Scottish Gaelic, or I think that's what you would say. But it's Scottish, which means little knife. So I'm the beloved little knife. And then my background is obviously Scottish because of my name. That was my father's side. I think he was second generation. I think his grandparents moved to Hamilton, Ontario to work in the steel company there. And my mom is Métis. Her family names are Dussom and Brissette, which are names that can be found in and around the Georgian Bay, the Métis community in the Georgian Bay. But they originated also within the Métis communities in Lesser Slave Lake area as well. And so I grew up in my mom's, mostly connected to my mom's family, and so that the stories of being Métis were always passed on to us. Didn't necessarily know what that meant for a great deal of my life. Like I had no problems in certain settings to say I was Métis, but I wasn't really kind of sure all the details of that. And then, yeah, like about 25 years ago, my mom started kind of researching what that meant to her, became a citizen with the Métis Nation of Ontario. I kind of resisted just out of my anarchist political beliefs that I didn't want to belong to a nation, right. But then was challenged that that is one way that we identify ourselves, and it could be an important aspect of how we identify ourselves. So I eventually became also a citizen with the Métis Nation of Ontario, as well as my brothers and other cousins and all that kind of stuff. So. And since that time, actually it was a significant process receiving my citizenship. I was already interested in what it meant to be Métis, but it just kind of opened a lot of doors for me to explore in a different way than I had been. So yeah, like, you know, just like so many of us on that journey of trying to understand what it means to be a Métis person living in a city, and how that translates into my identity and who I am as a person.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that, Dave.
Yeah.
When we talk about identity, I know that it took me a long time to find my way back to something that I never knew was inside of me. You know, from being in the system and foster care system, being part of the 60 Scoop, being raised with a Mennonite family, I knew I was different. I knew my sister and I were different because we just knew that we were different. We looked alike. We didn't look like them. but we felt very good on the land, and it was just something in us. And but identity is such a big component about who we are as people. And I can say that there's a lot of identity stuff going on right now in our communities in regards to people saying they're Indigenous and maybe not being able to prove their lineage or their identity.
Yeah.
And it's getting really muddy. It's getting very weedy. People are getting called out left, right, and center, and it breaks my heart. I can empathize with people who are trying to capitalize on being Indigenous, and it should stop. But then I also look at all these things that happened years ago where you know, Indigenous and non-Indigenous people would marry, and then at that time a bill, you would lose your status if you were an Indigenous woman. You know, you married a white guy, there goes your status, and then all of a sudden that identity and everything stops for the other generations, and it just becomes, everything becomes stagnant and very fractured.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I think like the whole identity thing is like very, like I see it as very complex.
Yeah.
There's not like, part of it is because like the the colonial system that the government's put in place, which is like there's three places you can fall in as an Indigenous person.
Yeah.
You're either Métis or you're First Nations or you're Inuit. But in those three categories, there's all kinds of different blendings of things that have happened. You know, they understand, like, just to use the example of Métis, like the idea that if you're mixed, you're Métis,
Right.
Which the Métis people don't necessarily agree with, because they see themselves as not a mixed people, but a people that have come out of a blending of cultures. But even in that, there's like all these complexities of, you know, where were you born, you know, all these kinds of things, and it's just so hard. And then when you take in, you know, the colonial process throughout history of trying to assimilate or make a people disappear, all that has a huge impact on people who lost connection, like you were talking about, through marriage, or you know, were in the wrong place at the wrong time and never got a status, or you know, like all those kinds of things. And now those children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who understand that they have a connection, a blood connection to in some way to being Indigenous, it's really hard for them to find a place to belong.
It is, and you know what happened in the schools and the scoops. You know, people were so far displaced from their culture and their heritage that some to this day will never find their way back. We know, and we can visibly see that they're Indigenous, maybe even 100% Indigenous, but from what happened in the schools in regards to spirituality and religion, you know, all of a sudden spirituality is pushed out of the way, and now everybody's really focused on religion, which really puts identity in the very back seat. You know? So what are you doing today, Dave?
Today, well, I'm besides sitting with Clarence. My work today, I have been working with the White Owl Native Ancestry Association over the last, I think, close to 6 years, 6 years. And then I'm a part of a collective, Indigenous collective called Wasaktu Winawak. And in those two things, I've been involved with land-based work. And so I, just to tell a long story very shortly, but while I was doing that work with Global Youth Network that I talked about earlier, I took a break and I walked the Bruce Trail from the beginning to the end, 600 or 800 kilometers, whatever it is. Now I can't remember. But anyway, whatever it was a 43-day walk, and
it's almost like a pilgrimage.
Actually, it was a pilgrimage. I never actually set off as a pilgrimage. I was trying to raise some money for a project in El Salvador.
Okay. All right.
I thought, oh, like I've always wanted to walk the Bruce Trail, and you know, I could get sponsored per kilometer, and I'd make this money, and we could put it into this project, this youth project we were working on. And then I started walking. And it became, like, without me saying this is a pilgrimage, it slowly became that. Like, it was, like, the focus really changed. And as I walked each day, like, you know, within the rhythm of walking, and, like, the Bruce Trail is not like this, you know, it's kind of an urban trail. Like,
Right.
it's a long trail that you can pop off almost anywhere and find a corner store and, you know, buy a Coke if you needed one or something. That I never did that, but but it's possible. But just the rhythm of each day being pretty much the same, and at the end of the trip, I was different.
Okay.
I was a different person. I couldn't tell you how I was different. I knew I was different. I couldn't intellectually tell you, you know, oh, I was, you know, this happened, but I just knew I was different. And I'd always, like in what you're saying with you and your sister wanting to be on the land, myself and my brothers were always the same. Like,
Okay.
we just wanted to be on the land. And all of a sudden that drive, or that, I don't even know if it was a drive, but within me there was just this thing that just wanted to be on the land. You know, could have spent the rest of my life walking, you know, kind of a thing. But kind of came home and was really trying to process what that meant. I started a master's course in Indigenous Studies, and where basically, like, for my master's, and even this was kind of like not necessarily strategic thought, but as I went through my master's, I began to understand the experience I had, and the importance of land in our identity and who we are, the importance of land to the sense of belonging that we have, and all that kind of stuff. And at the same time, I was working with a group of I had started working with a group of Indigenous students on just a little garden plot. Which again wasn't strategic. It was just kind of like, oh, we should do something. Let's do this, right? But as I did it and heard the students talking about these Indigenous students living in the city, most of them were like third generation students who had lived in the city, were no longer connected to traditional territory or land. As we began to talk, I heard them say some of the same things I was feeling, like we don't know where we belong. We don't know what land we belong to. We don't know. We feel like we have to always fight for our identity, because, you know, we can't just say I belong to such and such a place, or that kind of thing. There was all these kind of things that these young people were feeling. And then as we talked, we began to realize that maybe like in the city, and at that time I had not heard anybody talk this way, but maybe in the city we could find land and belong to that as Indigenous people. And that was just like created the question, like, for me, how do we as urban Indigenous people, and it's not to create a separation between non-urban or urban, but I think there is unique questions for us as urban Indigenous people. How do we belong to the land? And how does the land not be something that's far away, but how do we belong to the land right here? Right. And so that became a question that I think was voiced through these young people, myself, from coming back from my trip. And so as I was asking that question, I met other Indigenous people who were asking the same question. And we started kind of meeting together to talk about it and process, and the idea of this little tiny garden that we had, we were like, oh, like maybe this is a part of this belonging. And so we began to expand the idea of gardens, inviting more people in, and learning how to grow traditional foods, all that kind of stuff. And so I was just doing this, and I was just barely making a living, which is kind of like most of my life. Just scratching out a little bit of a living. And then White Owl came, and they said, we really like what you do, and we would like you to do that with us. And so I was just like, and we'll pay you to do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I'm in. So for the last 5-6 years, I've been doing land-based work, growing food, but also White Owl had a sugar bush in the city that we've been harvesting maple syrup, and then just doing land-based work with youth, and started doing a little bit around land-based wellness with children and youth. So just taking them on the land, teaching them how to chop wood, make a fire, but talking about who they are as Indigenous children in connection to the land. So, yeah, that's what I've been doing.
I like that. Now, you also had a shared role there with somebody where you were a joint executive director. And maybe that's new, but that was new to me. I've never heard of an executive director position being shared by multiple people. So,
yeah, that was actually really good.
Yeah.
Because White Owl had its own thing. Like
Right.
it had a focus on child and youth work, but it was more connected around supports, counseling, that kind of thing. And so they saw the land piece as something connected to it.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to do the social work and
Part of it.
like that piece. And I'm not an administrator. I've worked in nonprofit organizations my entire life and have been so fortunate that people have come alongside and have been able to put those important pieces together. And so that was kind of like, I was kind of free to develop these ideas around land-based work, while the other executive director kind of managed the social work piece and a little bit more of the administration work.
That's a unique position. You
Yeah.
know, that brings in everybody's gifts.
Yeah.
And why the last thing we ever want to do is put somebody into a position that doesn't feed them and doesn't give them anything. So
Yeah.
I think that's pretty amazing. And you're also are you working on a PhD?
Oh yeah, I'm working on a PhD
You're
as
doing
well.
that too.
Yeah, well, I have working on it might be an understatement.
Okay.
I was working on it, but over the last while, I've just been really busy, so I haven't, since June, I have hardly done anything.
Okay.
I've been working with the school a little bit on that. My goal is to finish it. I actually have just made some decisions in my life so that in the next few months I'll be free to kind of really focus on that and finish that up hopefully by September 2025.
Amazing.
Yeah, and my PhD is just basically about our work and like
Land-based work?
Land-based work. It's about, again, asking the question, the same question, like how do we as Indigenous people who live in the city and find our homes in the city still find our the roots of our identity on the land. And so so that's still a significant question, because I feel like we've just, well, I don't even know if we've just begun to answer it, but we're just starting to chip away. And I think that it's really, but it is an important question because we're at whatever 70% of the indigenous population
Right.
now lives in the city, and what does that mean, and what does that look like, and how do we do that, and what is the creative process of being urbanized in a sense, and often I think for indigenous people and for the way other people see indigenous people is that the city shouldn't be our home. We should be like in the bush, and but that's no longer our reality. We are here, and that changes our cultural expressions, how we relate to each other, all that kind of stuff. So I think it doesn't make us different than indigenous people who don't live in the city,
Right.
but it does bring up questions and ways of doing things that we kind of, we're not, we're multicultural in the city,
Yes.
And as time goes by, more and more people are losing that connection to reserve or that kind of thing, not on purpose, but it just kind of drifts away. But who they are as a people still needs to be foundational on the land.
Yeah, and that's our biggest connection, right?
Yeah.
When you talk about people living off reserve, I know that my reserve, 80% of our people live off reserve.
Yeah.
There's not a lot to go back to, or there's mining jobs, but it's just not for them, right? And it's like where we hear generations who have farms, right?
Yeah.
Does the next generation want to take that role up? Well,
Yeah.
maybe not. It's kind of the same thing where we hear about churches and these shrinking and dwindling congregations. It's things change, things evolve.
Yeah.
Generations don't want to do the same thing that their parents
Yeah.
did. But as for indigenous people, Métis, our connection is to the land.
Yeah.
She's our mother. She gives us everything that we need, and I think it's great that you're doing what you're doing. And wasn't it a couple years ago that you were trying to talk to the cities, and maybe set up something smaller on some parks, or just to give us some presents?
Yeah.
Or were you going to tap trees in some of these little places, or you just wanted to have fires?
Yeah, we've been in discussion with the city, the region,
Right.
Universities, colleges, around land. I just came from a meeting with University of Waterloo around like land space, and so in those conversations we've done, like when you're trying to find something, when you're like when I guess it's new to you,
Right.
you have to have space to experiment. Like, will this work? Let's try this. So we've been doing that. So we've worked with the city in a little park,
Okay.
just off of Guelph Street, and we've done some indigenous planting within the park. It's been a long process because we started it at COVID. It all got shut down during COVID. We came back to it with with not a lot of vision because we had moved on to other things, but we've kind of kept going to do it. So we put in trees and wild plants, flowers, and or natural plants and flowers, and some food-bearing things. And we still have more to do. Like this spring, we'll put in some art, and we have a few more trees to plant in there. And so it's just kind of creating this space where we can go actually and harvest. We don't have to ask permission. It's open to the indigenous community to harvest and that kind of thing. But so we've done anything from that small space. We still garden up in Waterloo, like from that little garden.
Yeah.
We moved just a little bit over to some space on University of Waterloo land where we've been gardening, maybe like about a quarter acre. So in food production, we probably garden just over an acre of produce throughout the throughout the city, and that's all different relationships. So that's University to Waterloo relationship, Steckley Farm, which is a farm within Kitchener. We have there, where we have access to, I think, almost an acre
Okay.
of land there, and then Blair Outdoor Education Center, which is owned by the school board. We're growing there.
So what, you have three gardens, maybe more right now? Are you looking to expand more? Do you
Yeah.
have the manpower and bandwidth? Or are you looking for volunteers?
Yeah, we're always looking for volunteers.
Okay, we'll throw that. Did
yeah.
everybody hear that? White Owl
Yeah.
is looking for volunteers to help on the land.
Yeah, we have the meeting I just had, like, with University of Waterloo.
Yeah.
That is like, there's a large space that us, like, Indigenous community members, as well as the Indigenous organizations on campus,
Yeah.
and some of the Indigenous faculty have been working to get some control over that space, like a large space that could be created into an Indigenous space with gardens, food, outdoor kitchens, sweat lodge and teaching lodge and all that kind of stuff built into one kind of area. So we're still in negotiating with the city,
Yep.
or with the university, but also with the city to support the infrastructure we need for that. And so we're there gardening, but it could be like a much bigger space. So we're always looking at growing within the limits of our human power.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, we're trying to, as much as possible, create. I worked with a young man a few years ago who actually broke it down to, like, the population of Indigenous people within the region,
Okay.
and how much food would be needed to be produced by Indigenous people to feed that population.
Yeah.
Things I don't think of or break down that much, but it wasn't huge. Like, in a sense, it's a big population, but, like, if you grow food in a good way, we could get a lot of food out to that population. But the other thing is, like, growing food in the city,
Yeah.
having land in the city,
Yeah.
doing some restorative land work within the city. All of that contributes to environmental issues and educates people around the environment. Like, when you're connected to your food, when you no longer see food as just from the grocery store, but
Yeah.
you see food from the land, that changes your whole relationship with the land. And so I think all those things are significant, not just in the sense of growing food, but in, again, coming back to the relationship with land. That's, food and our relationship with the land go together. And then how we then care for our mother,
Right.
and then how our mother cares for us. We create that reciprocal relationship, which is really, really significant, I think.
And you become in sync with creation.
Yeah.
Right, because you're doing everything. Everything is different
Yeah.
during those 4 seasons, right? And I think right now you're going to be coming up to a pretty busy time.
The best time.
The best time. I know that all Dave wants to do is tap trees.
That's right. If maple syrup or maple sap ran all year round, you could just find me in a sugar bush somewhere. It's a really great season. We're just we could have been tapped in now and probably produced some maple syrup at this point, because we've had such a warm week, but it's going to freeze up again. So we'll have another. We for sure will have a little bit better season than just this week. But yeah, it's a great time. You're in the woods all day long. You watch. Typically, we're not sure about this year, but usually you watch the season change. We set up our camp in the woods, like in the snow and the ice, and it's cold. And when you break camp, the greens are starting to come up on the forest floor.
That's beautiful.
And we usually have a little feast of wild leeks and stuff like that after we've broke camp. So, but to watch the seasons change, and what we discovered as we've talked to the elders about the time is that also the sugar season, or the sugar moon, is also the time we renew our relationship with the land. And that's really what I feel like I'm doing when I'm out there. Everything we do is spiritual and is ceremony. And so making maple syrup, although I love it and it's fun and we have a good time, that in itself is ceremony. And we I know those who work with me on a daily basis, it is a time for them for renewal for their relationship. So I think that's really, the significant piece. It's great to make something that tastes awesome,
Right.
but it's also great to be there and share that experience with the land, with the trees, and yeah.
So with White Owl, it sounds like you have some counseling going on.
Yeah, we've been working, so White Owl's focus is still with children and youth. Over the last few years, we've changed what counseling looks like.
Yep.
So we're not doing, even though when I came on, the idea was that they were doing counseling from an Indigenous perspective, so it was much more relational, and there wasn't you have 6 sessions over 6 weeks or something like that. It could go on for a year or whatever. But we, as we blended the kind of the land base with the idea of wellness and counseling, now our whole focus is on land-based wellness, which is what I would say is kind of like that land. Land-based, when we say that, what we're saying is that the land actually takes the lead. Yeah. And then we are just the facilitators. So in counseling, what we've started doing is, in a sense, allowing the land to take the lead in somebody's well-being, and we're just the facilitators of what that means. And so I think that's a very, that would, I believe, would be like a traditional way of counseling, within the Métis community or First Nations communities, and but we've also seen it has results. Not everybody wants to be on the land, so there's other opportunities, but for those who kind of venture out with us, we do see results, and it's not anything we've said or done, which is kind of cool. It's just being with somebody on the land, sharing, learning, chopping wood, making fires, talking about what all this means, having them feel kind of like they can, do something. I had a young guy work with me last year who, 9 years old, and came out to the sugar bush and worked with us 1 day a week, and totally changed. For his birthday or something, I can't remember what it was. He asked for an axe, started making fires in his backyard.
Amazing. Chopping
his own wood, doing all that kind of stuff, right? So it was just, but you could see in his face and the way he carried himself and how he talked that he was beginning to kind of come to terms with, who he was, and that it was the beginning, but you could see that the land had done that for him.
Nice.
Yeah.
Realigned him and trying to help him find out what his gifts are.
Yeah.
And then also, do you have some kind of social enterprise going on at White Owl, or?
So we have a kitchen.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's somewhere between social enterprise and work or nonprofit work, in the sense of programming, I guess. But yeah, so we over the last year we're still in the midst of developing what it would look like. But we started the kitchen with Sydney, who is a chef, and she came on, a year ago, like almost just over a year ago, and we didn't have the funding for her to be there,
Okay.
but we just believed that it was the right thing at the right time to kind of work towards,
And you did it.
and we did it, and so.
I don't mean to interrupt, but that's the way
Yeah,
you do things too.
yeah, that is the way. And then, so Sydney had to kind of like do something to generate a little bit of money to pay the rent and all that kind of stuff. So she started doing catering. That took off really quite well, very quickly, which is a great thing. We've become more established in the kitchen now, and so we're really kind of working on like what does programming look like from a kitchen. So it's the whole kind of, and the vision for it was really kind of like from land to table.
Right.
So we're producing food. It comes right around full circle into recipes and to what we eat, and education around what we eat and why we eat this and all that kind of stuff, and health and all that kind of stuff in our programming, teaching kids how to cook, and so we've really just started exploring that whole piece of programming around educating, especially around educating kids, like youth, how to cook and that kind of thing. But also really important for us to understand like the health of our own health when we're connected to our food and stuff like that. And then the other aspect is over the last, I don't know, when we started growing food, when we actually ended up with a lot of food, way back with our gardens, we were kind of like, oh, we got a lot of food. What do we do? We had, like, as usual, we didn't have like a great plan. You know, typically we shared our food within our own group, and then we started producing more. And so we started a food share probably just before the pandemic started, and then carried it on through the pandemic.
Okay.
And so that food share is like our food in the summertime, springtime, fall time is just shared within the Indigenous community on a right now it's bi-weekly basis. At the time it was weekly, and all through the pandemic it became kind of like a point of connection for a lot of Indigenous people who were locked at home and could come out and pick up food and actually see a face and take some food. So so we kept that going, and then we ended up adding like a year long. So we purchase food once ours is gone. We start to purchase food, healthy food to still share for the community. We did that weekly until just recently, and we wanted to kind of create more opportunity for community. So we wanted to have a meal, and then also the food share.
Okay.
So bi-weekly now we're doing a meal together, a simple meal, where people can come in and then they can pick up their food supplies and take it with them from our it's not really a pantry, but we just lay everything out, and you can take what you need with meat and vegetables and fruits.
Okay. Do you ever help distribute that? If somebody really couldn't, navigate that, would you help them out with maybe dropping something off?
Yeah, like with the elder, like quite a few, like there's a number of elders that we still do that, or we pick them up and bring them for the meal.
Okay.
For some elders, it's their only point of contact. They're kind of shut in, or that kind of thing. So their only real connection with the Indigenous community is to kind of come out for a bowl of soup with us and stuff like that. So yeah, we would do that. And our goal, because with all around food and our land work, is really the whole thing is building community, and what does community look like. And so that's why we've moved to kind of like to being able to share a meal together to create that aspect of connection and community. So last week when we did it, I think 2 weeks ago, when we had like 35 families represented that kind of came, picked up food, had some soup and bannock and stuff like that. So yeah, we want to keep that kind of connection going. Yeah.
That's amazing. I got a question. You know, I think it was you're doing some team building last year out at Steckley Farm, and I gave you a call because I had some beavers
Oh
to
yeah,
drop
yeah,
off
that's
to
right.
you.
Yeah.
And did
Yeah.
that 35-pound beaver? Did you guys ever do anything with
This
that?
weekend.
Yeah.
I'm working on it this weekend. So
That was the biggest beaver I've ever seen, Dave. Like I handed it to you, and it was like
I
we
know I
both
have
just
everybody passes the picture of me holding it with my big smile, holding it up like
we
this.
both just laughed because I like here you go. I've never seen anything like this, and have at her.
Yeah. So this year, the next 2 weekends,
Yeah.
this weekend, we've wanted for a long time
Yeah.
to provide with our youth and for ourselves as well, training on how to trap and skin and clean and
Amazing.
tan,
Yeah.
do the whole processing. We've tanned hides ourselves, not very well because we kind of like did it off of YouTube.
All right.
But we have actually a Métis guy coming down from up north who, you know, this is a part of his life experience, and he actually can certify us as trappers.
Nice.
And so there's about 10 of us who will be certified. It takes 2 weekends, so we'll have 2 days this coming weekend and 2 days next weekend up north.
Mm-hmm.
2 days here, and then 2 days up north, and where we'll just learn kind of the whole process. But yeah, we've wanted to do it a long time. It just took a while to find the right connection and make it all happen, and we're excited about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited about some stuff too. I know we at Crowshield Lodge are excited because you know, you and I've been hanging out for about 10 years on and off. We've done the dance. We're still hanging out, so that must say something, right? But yeah,
We still like each other.
yeah, we still
Yeah.
like each other. We still want to chat.
Yeah.
But saying that, both of our organizations who are working on maybe coming together a bit closer.
Yeah.
We can't really say anything now because we're just trying to figure something out. But it's about Crowshield Lodge and White Owl just walking a path of
Yeah.
you know, as equals beside each other.
Yeah.
It's a new opportunity. I think it's great because we're all about belonging too. We're all about a connection. We're all about building community and starting that fire inside of someone, so that after we spend time with them, either in the bush, on the land, in the garden, they can answer those questions about who am I, why am I, and what is my purpose in life. And you know, we always say this at Crowshield Lodge. We see this as a time of opportunity. I think more partnership should happen. More people should look outside of the box and try things they've never done before, and maybe, you know, embrace that element of risk, because I think what our role and our responsibilities are is to start laying the foundations of these places and spaces for the next generations, so that by the time you and I are ready to step back, you know, these gardens, these enterprises, the counseling, like everything will just be in place, and then you'll be just tapping trees and boiling, making your the stuff that you like the best, you know.
Yeah.
But Dave, what I want to say is just, I respect you as a brother, as a man, as a community member, as a Métis, somebody from the Métis Nation,
Yeah.
and from the Cree Nation. I really appreciate what you bring to our community and what you carry, because I get stressed, right, from things that happen in the organization and our community. And you know, you're the best role model for me because I have seen you stressed, and you look just like this, right? And I'm there, Dave. Yeah, you're stressed. Clarence, I'm a bit stressed out. And I'm there. Really? Yeah. Like you're stressed out right now? Yeah, I'm stressed, Clarence. And I'm there. Interesting, Dave. how do I get some of that? And does that come from all that tapping you do in the is that magic water that
It's got to be the magic water.
yeah, that magic sweet water that comes out of the tree first. And I remember having teachings about that, right? Where you'd get a jar of it and they'd
Yeah.
say you could have a little bit of this or a cup every day, but you don't want to drink too much because it will really clean you out.
Yeah.
You know, and that's almost like everything with that we drink and that comes off the
Yeah,
land, right? Cedar tea,
Got
you drink too much
limits.
of that,
Yeah.
right? Chaga, too much of that. You know, all of this stuff is yeah, just within limits.
Yeah.
But it's all there for us to use
Yeah.
from our mother, and all we have to do is just ask,
Yeah.
just ask. So that's the beauty, and I want to thank you for your time today.
Yeah. It's
Right.
great to be here.
It's awesome that
Yeah.
you showed up. We couldn't ask for a better day.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, that water is running in those trees. You could just see it, right? So saying that, thank you for your time. We
Yep.
do have a little gift for you.
Oh, thanks.
What we did get you is got you
Oh, the
a hoodie.
hoodie.
A hoodie.
Awesome.
Let's see. Perfect.
XL?
Shield Lodge, yeah.
I know everybody out there thinks I just take a large, but it's not true. It's an extra large.
Well, I was thinking, we thought it was medium. That's really what we thought. And here we want to give you a shirt too, just so you
Awesome.
can have that matching
It's just like me in plaid.
workwear.
I triple plaid in the sugar bush, so it's a
Triple
plaid coat, plaid shirt, plaid undershirt. So, yeah.
You know,
And now I can triple crow shield or double crow shield.
double. We can triple you up if that's what you want. We can get you a hat and a toque, and we can even make it a quad.
Oh, and I also have a plaid hat too.
Yeah, I have a plaid story I'll share with you one day. Yeah, I'll share it now. I dressed in the dark when I used to work at the House of Friendship, and I showed up at work. I had a plaid hat on, I had a plaid shirt, and I had plaid pants on. and my coworkers, the women that I worked with, they just looked at me and then they took a double look. And then they said, "Clarence, what are you doing? No, you can't do that." And I said, "Well, that just looks kind of okay to me. Looked like a little golfer."
Yeah.
Right? A little guy that was golfing out in Scotland or something. But saying that, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to what this year is going to bring, White Owl and Crow Shield Lodge.
Yeah, me too.
And we want to thank everybody out there who's taken the time to watch this little interview or this little session that Dave and I are just sitting here and catching up. So we wish everybody well, and embrace each day to the fullest. And we'll see you on the flip side. Bum up.